You're looking at F1 2011, the sequel to F1 2010, if you couldn't have guessed already, or if you can't count. Ultimately, the bodywork of this year's F1 game remains largely the same, but take a little peek under the bonnet and you'll find several new changes. Codemasters Birmingham have tinkered, tuned and chucked in a whole bunch of new components. The result? Well, it's a much different beast to its predecessor. It's like learning to drive all over again. These aren't the most massive changes in the grand scheme of things, but all the little improvements build up to something much bigger altogether. The vehicles, for example, are a lot less skittish than last year. You're going to have a harder time taming them. And you might think with an increased demand on skill that things have taken a step back. Well, not quite. It's just a better representation of car handling. It rewards those who use the whole depth of the right trigger and not just the two extremes. With the 2011 season, we find a fat new rulebook. It's now got the KERS and the DRS, also correctly spelt KERS and DRS. Obviously these stand for something. KERS is Kinetic Energy Recovery System, and DRS is Drag Reduction System. Anyone who follows F1 will know what I'm talking about, but for those unaware, I'll explain. When you activate KERS, you'll be able to get an extra 80 brake horsepower out of your car. DRS, on the other hand, opens a flap on the rear wing, giving you that extra oomph needed when overtaking. These two new features shake up the way you play the game considerably. You may be the greatest driver on Earth, but you are nothing without your team. Nothing. There's a much greater degree of strategy required this time around. As usual, you'll have plenty to tinker with on the car, but there's also a new team feedback system. Your technician will be able to inform you on what's happening during the race. He'll also let you know when you're lagging behind. Cheers. Overall, what you have here is a much deeper driving experience than last year's game.
There's some debris on your tyres. You'll struggle for grip until they clear.
Codemasters put their hand up, admitting that the multiplayer was a little lacking in F1 2010. With 2011, however, we see a revamped multiplayer and co-op experience. The game now supports 24 cars online. That is, 16 real-life drivers and 8 AI. Not only this, but they've added a co-op career too. You'll be able to play with a friend online for a whole season. Racing head-to-head can, of course, still be done locally, but naturally, you'll have to share the screen. Formula 1 2011 fixes things that were broken. It adds things that were missing and improves wherever possible. It's the small changes that the core F1 audience will appreciate. Things like the oscillating bodywork, revamped pit stops, tweaked tyre degradation, and a dynamic cloud system. While casual players might question whether much is different this time, those in the know, those whose second home is behind the steering wheel, will agree that F1 2011 is the most complete representation of the sport to date.
You've been given a time penalty. It'll be added to your time at the end of the session. You've been black flagged. That's our race over. Head back to the pits.